On this episode of McElroy's Motors, I discuss why I think my 2004 Kia Optima is the best daily driver money can buy today. Before we dive on in, I think a brief overview is much needed.
It is simply wild to think just how far the oldest car company in Korea has evolved in the last 20 years. Gone are the days of the most boring cars in existence, and in place are some of the hottest cars on the market, with excellent warranties and a very controversial hood emblem. Kia launched the Optima in the United States in 2001 as a rival to the Toyota Camry and Honda Accord of its day, using Jada Pinkett Smith before her days of alopecia to promote a humdrum sedan with a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty, something competitors today don't even have. Kia's first ever model was this, the Brisa, the Brisa, the Brisa, however which way it's pronounced. Either way, it was launched in 1974, 2 years before the rock band U2 existed, and it was a cast-off Mazda design.
Fast forward 30 years to 2004 where this Kia Optima was made. 5 years after Chumbawamba released their one-hit wonder, Tub Thumping, a song that everybody from the late 90s will remember.
I get knocked out.
But anyways, it is definitely a remarkable sight to see because 10 years prior, in 1994, when Kia was starting to launch themselves in the United States market, they were seen as a bit of a joke because they only launched around the West Coast, and it didn't take until 1997 until they went nationwide. And when they went nationwide, they only had two cars in the lineup, the Fiat and the Sportage. But despite that, they also were building one more car for the US market, the Ford Aspire. Let's talk about styling with this Kia, because it is a case of nice ass, shame about the face. Okay, I admit, I was a bit juvenile there. If I have one thing to say about the front end styling is the fact that I think it looks a bit like the Jaguar X-Type of the era. And the back end kind of looks like a Volvo or maybe an Audi of the era. You tell me. And as for the side profile, it kind of looks like just an ordinary mid-size sedan from the era. It doesn't look anything special. It definitely looks better looking than this thing though, I'll give it that. Let's talk about value for money because that's where this thing really shines, because even though I paid just $2,700 for it back in May of this year, I'll admit it did come with a lot of things, including the original window sticker, which, according to the window sticker here, this car sold new for $17,165, and it came with all the bells and whistles. The additional installed equipment or options included carpeted floor mats and a first aid kit, to which this car still has. And even though the value for money was always a good thing with this car, there's a few things missing on it. For instance, it lacks anti-lock brakes. I'll come back to that in a second. You may argue with me when I say this, but I think with the ideal daily driver must have 4 doors. So does this Optima have it? Check. 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 Let's talk about space inside, because I'm not a very tall person. I'm only about 5'7" or so, but even so, I got a ton of headroom and I can easily have enough leg room. As for the back seat, you'll find enough room for a mess, but for someone a lot taller than me, my friend Neil is 6'2". He fits back here no problem at all. Now you might think with all that precious legroom in the back seat that the trunk might be compromised. Well, I have some good news if you're the Albanian Mafia, because the trunk space on this Kia is actually quite large. How? You get back in there. You didn't see any of that. Let's talk engines. Now when the Kia Optima was launched, well this one at least, it was available with a 2.4-liter 4-cylinder or a 2.7-liter V6. This has the 2.4-liter dual overhead cam 16-valve 4. It makes 136 horsepower. If you're wanting a daily driver or something that will get the job done, 0 to 60 really doesn't matter. Okay, I'm lying. It comes up in about 9 seconds. But it's a very reliable engine because it has Mitsubishi-derived parts. I would say, as an owner of this car, I think fuel economy is definitely one of this car's biggest strengths. I was able to drive this thing from Belleville, Michigan, and drive this thing all the way back to Ohio, a distance of roughly covering 385 miles, and this car averaged nearly 35 miles per gallon. Coupled with that, with the fact that it has a 17-gallon fuel tank, and you can go up to 500 miles on this thing. So if you guys want to, maybe we can do some kind of economy run with this thing. Let me know what you guys think. And while my Kia is definitely not fast, it is certainly faster than this, my 2-cylinder death trap right here. This is my fun car, to which my Kia most certainly isn't. Let's get on the road. When I bought this car back in May, I was pretty well aware that the reliability of this car may or may not be its strong suit. But this car has turned out to be a pleasant and rather surprisingly reliable little car. I bought it with 98,000 miles on it at the time, and it now has just over 113,000 miles. So I put 15,000 miles on it in just over half a year. And it's been incredible. I've driven it out of state a total of 4 times during that time. It has been to New York, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and to Washington, D.C. And this car has been proven excellent. Though that being said though, when I first got the car, it was far from perfect. It had a very, very bad wheel bearing on the driver's side, and as such, it was growling as if it was like a dog with its tail recently chopped off. Even though this car is not fun to drive by any stretch of the means, it is definitely very comfortable. I drove this car from Akron, Ohio to Alexandria, Virginia, a distance of roughly 400 miles, and it took roughly 7 hours to get there. And when I got out, the backache I had at the time when I got there wasn't as bad as you might think. It definitely was a very quiet and compliant highway cruiser. And while the interior design is nothing offensive, nothing crazy or anything like that, I will say though, it is very, very boring. And the plastics used, they're a bit shiny and a bit hard. I'll be honest here, I thought I would see that this car would have a check engine light, maybe some kind of warning light or something between the time I bought it and now. But nothing. Nothing's come up in the 6 months I've owned it. It is easy to see why this car sold for a very low price back in 2004, because even though this car offered exceptional value for money, it does feel a little bit old-fashioned. And by which I mean, even though this car was made in 2004, it feels like it was made in 1989. And the fact that it does not have anti-lock brakes backs me up on that. What also gives it its old-fashioned feel is the sound it makes when you start the car before buckling up. Some people find it adorable. I find this sound a little irritating, to say the least. It's not the sound itself that's irritating, it's the way it's programmed into the car. Because not only does it make the sound before you buckle up, it also makes the sound when you open the door. But this car makes absolutely no noise at all when you leave your headlights on. So, that's a bit mysterious, to say the least. Then again, calling this car old-fashioned is a bit unkind. Calling it old school might be better. Nah, I think it's a bit like me, just trying to keep up with modern times. It is a shame that this car is actually rather dull, because I was expecting it to be a little bit more fun to drive than it is, because it has a manual shifting mode on the transmission. But in truth, this car is about as much fun to drive as having a blind child watch paint dry. And while 136 horsepower is enough for anybody's daily commute, I would say that with 5 people on board, plus their luggage, this car definitely feels a little bit underpowered. It's not so bad here in Ohio, but when I was driving through the hills and valleys of southern Pennsylvania getting into Maryland, I could definitely tell that this thing could use maybe about 15 to 20 more horsepower of this house. I love it, 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 I love it. Okay, I'm getting a bit distracted here. I will admit, I am a car guy, and one thing I've always strongly believed in is the fact that if you're gonna have something fun and interesting like I do with my yellow car, I will say you need something more sensible and practical as your daily driver. And that's where this car really comes in, because I work 3 jobs as it is, and my grandmother is in a wheelchair. So as such, if this car gets scratched, I'm not going to care too much about it. In fact, this car got seriously scratched when some Nissan cut me off and ended up sliding into a guardrail due to my lack of anti-lock brakes. But that's another story. Now if this was, let's say, a brand new Lexus, I would have cried. And yes, even though I can afford a brand new Lexus, I'd rather drive old crap like this any day of the week. Because I know this car's gonna get scratched. I know that this car's gonna get battered, but at the same time, that's what it's there for. It's there for daily usage. But that's not the whole story here, because this car is becoming increasingly rare as the days go on. I have not seen a Kia Optima of this era before I bought this one in quite some time. And I always thought they were kind of dreary cars, and while they are to drive, it's definitely becoming a rarer sight as the days progress. Because after I bought this one, I've only seen maybe a total of 6 others. And that is saying a lot, because I was only able to see one at the Ford Theater in Washington, D.C. by far the least place I was expecting to see one of these. And as such, you do get some interest from other car guys, because Zach Pradle from the YouTube channel Shooting Cars came all the way out from near Chicago just to review this Kia Optima, which was a very, very splendid treat. And he was actually pretty super excited about it, despite this car failing the big friggin' bottle test.
Big friggin' bottle test here in the Kia Optima from 2004. And unfortunately, it fails. I was really hoping it wouldn't. But alas, it does indeed fail.
So you might think with this car being 20 years old and covering 15,000 miles since I purchased it, you might think that this car might need some work done to it. And the answer to this is yes. Yes, it does. So what exactly does it need? Well, for starters, we're going to talk about the accessory belt. I'm not sure if it needs replaced or needs tightened, but if I start this car on a cold winter's day, let's say if it's less than 10 to 15 degrees outside, and I turn on the front defroster, this car squeals louder than a piglet would going through a vasectomy. Secondly, I think this car either needs new CV axles or ball joints, because every time I make a sharp turn to the left or even a sharp turn to the right, this thing knocks as if it's the FBI knocking on my door. That being said, however, this has proven to be one excellent car for many reasons. For starters, it has the best heater of any car I've ever owned, and despite having more cancer on it than my mother would if she keeps her drug habits up, this thing has been proven to be the most reliable and most sustainable daily driver I've ever had. And even though I complain about this car being as dull to drive as having a blind child watch paint dry, I will say, at least it's not causing me to fall asleep. I don't think. I'm sorry, what? So to sum up then, the interior on this car is 50 shades of gray, the amount of sportiness on this car is pretty much non-existent, and overall, this car is about as fun to look at as a gulag cell. So that begs the question, why would I drive this 19-year-old Kia versus the brand new Lexus that I told you guys I could afford earlier in this video? I live in a very busy city, and when you live or drive through a busy city, if you were in a brand new Lexus, for instance, you will have people come up on more than one occasion and ask you for money. Not so in this. People will think you're automatically dirt poor, which is a good thing, because if you know me at all, I don't like to show my wealth. I would honestly have more fun drowning than driving a brand new electric vehicle. In fact, I think I suffer from Tesla phobia. I feel better. So the moral of the story is this: it shouldn't really matter what everybody else thinks of your daily driver. It should be a case of what you think of your daily driver. In which case, I absolutely adore my Kia Optima. And if you want to see more of this Kia Optima, as well as my yellow classic car that you saw a brief clip or two in the video, feel free to subscribe to McElroy's Motors today. And we'll have more videos of this car, as well as many others, come along soon.